that is co-sponsoring the visit of John C. here. We are just absolutely ecstatic that we're here. And sponsoring this evening in particular. And in a moment, I'll introduce Professor Bron Taylor from the Religion Department to do the actual introduction of John. I just want to, you know what I want to do? I really want to read you 2 sentences from the mission statement of the U.S. Center for Spirituality and Health. The center encourages the cooperative exploration of a remarkable hypothesis that enhancing spirituality could enable us to optimize our potential for scientific creativity and for more effective health care. Its active participants acknowledge that a relationship with a deeper and higher reality is at the heart of spirituality, and that health involves physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual dimensions of individuals, families, communities, societies, and ecosystems. And especially our comment to examining spirituality and health in relationship to ecosystems is a sub-theme that goes through this whole year for us, beginning with our previous program with Alistair McIntosh that was just so exciting for us, and now with John C. I want to let you know, really what I want to let you know is that there's a good website to go to get all the information you need about us, which is Religion and Spirituality. Spirituality and Health, sorry, spiritualityandhealth.ufl.edu. So www.spiritualityandhealth, one word, right? That's where you find it. And there you'll find reference to 2 programs I wanted to mention. On November 6th, Dr. Heather Strange will be guiding a workshop called Encountering God in Illness. And it has to do with some very interesting work she did on prayer and healing. And in the process of doing that work, discovering that the prayer experiences that people had in that experimental situation were such that they said they met God. In whatever their own language was for that. And so it will be an exploration of that aspect of it that should be very, very interesting. And then Stephen Cook on Thursday, December 4th, who is in the Department of Psychology at Texas Tech, will be giving a lecture workshop on psychosocial issues and cardiac health. And those are, and we'll have perhaps one more program to announce coming up, hopefully. We'll be able to make that announcement soon, and that will round out our fall. It's been an amazing fall already. So that tells you a little bit about this particular context, and it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Professor Bron Taylor, who is the Samuel S. Hill Chair in Environmental Ethics at the University of Florida and in the Religion Department, and he'll introduce John, please.
It's my delight tonight and honor to introduce John C. to all of you, who will be speaking tonight in a few minutes on the theme of ecological healing. Before I give him the floor, I have a few thank yous to issue. First and foremost, to the Center for Spirituality and Health, a center that's become quite a collaborator already as we are working to develop a new graduate program that focuses on the intersection of religion, nature, and human cultures. So that we have been greatly enriched already by the support and participation of the center, and I couldn't be happier about that collaboration. Also tonight I want to thank the School of Natural Resources and the Environment and the programs in Environmental Land Use Law and the programs in Tropical Conservation and Development for their support for making tonight possible. So you see we have already an interdisciplinary group of hosts, and I think as the night goes forward you'll have some sense of why there are such diverse sectors at UF keen to have John here and happy to have to help sponsor his appearance. For 25 years, John C. has been one of the most creative and innovative environmental activists on the planet. His primary focus has been on the tropical rainforest, and I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail here because I think he'll hopefully fill out a lot of this. But as someone who studies environmental ethics and their embodied carriers, the grassroots environmental movements that try to express them, I've been particularly interested in John's work for a number of reasons. On the one hand, on the pragmatic level, he's been an innovator in just helping communities to think about how they might protect their own natural resources. And he's done so working with many different groups in very creative ways. Last night, some of you were here and saw a short video about the walkabout sawmills that he helped pioneer with the indigenous people in New Guinea to create sustainable livelihoods from the trees there without damaging those ecosystems. He's been involved in rainforests around the world, including in Ecuador. Some of the most important work has happened in Ecuador, where after helping to secure the boundaries of some indigenous rainforest preserves, he also helped to preserve the borders by creating, basically logging the borders and putting in trees to make sure that there could be no mistake if someone were penetrating those areas. And he's also worked on ecotourism projects and purchasing land, working with communities to give them a stake in protecting areas, some of which are very much under threat. So it's a delight also just to mention a few of those types of things. One of the things I've learned in looking at grassroots groups is how much they accomplish for almost no money. And certainly John Seed and the Rainforest Information Center that he founded and the other groups that he works with are worthy of our support. And those of you who are in a situation where you might be able to help out, I encourage you to do so, because I'm quite confident that any donations will be very, very well spent. I have a couple of other announcements that in addition to the talk tonight on ecological healing, John is going to be here over the weekend, and many of you are, I'm sure, already signed up for his workshop on Wild Earth, Wild Mind, Wild Heart, Experiencing Deep Ecology. And if anyone is interested in a weekend workshop with John, there's a couple of people here. I think Gavin Van Horn, why don't you stand up so people can find you, see Gavin afterward. All the proceeds from that event will go into John's rainforest work. And that's a perfect lead-in, I think, to where I think John's most enduring and innovative work has been and will be. And that is in trying to bring environmental activists means of not just connecting to the natural world, but also being empowered to do so in a context where it's very easy to get discouraged. And so a part of his work, in fact, probably the lion's share of his work over the last 25 years, has been to develop processes like the Council of All Beings, which I'm sure that he'll talk about tonight, and other processes that a religious studies scholar like me would call ritual processes, that are really designed to help to evoke in us our natural connections to nature and inspire us to its defense. He's kind of the Energizer Bunny of green ritual. He's traveled all over the world, and it's my privilege to introduce him to you tonight. Please welcome John Seed.
Well, thanks a lot, Shaya, and thanks, Bron, for those introductions and for inviting me to be here. I like the title of Ecological Healing because you can take off in a whole lot of different directions with that, you know, like which I hope to do tonight. But at the risk of repeating myself with those of you that were here last night, I'd like to tell you a little bit about how I come to be here and gives a bit of context and background for the ecological healing that I'd like to talk about. And I'm a rainforest activist since 1979, when I unexpectedly found myself taking part in a direct action in defence of rainforests near my home in northern New South Wales, Australia. And something happened to me there which was a kind of ecological healing, that my sense of being a stranger on this planet and being isolated and separate from the earth was healed from the experience of defending that forest. And I went there with some kind of delusion that I was going to try and save the forest, and found instead that it had saved me, and for which I've remained grateful ever since. I can't really say much more about it because I don't really know what happened, except that I was in about over 30 years old, and my whole life changed from one day to the next, more or less, which was a pretty unusual thing, and so something very strong happened to me there. And I found myself searching for ways in which I could protect rainforests, and very curious to find out more about them. And as I went around helping to protect, a movement began there that spread to other parts of Australia, and our group was invited down to Tasmania a couple of years later to help protect the temperate rainforests there from a huge dam that would have flooded the heart of that wilderness. And that was really the height of the movement in Australia, because at that time in 1983, over 3,000 people came from all over the country to defend that forest. And Australia's got, I guess, about a 25th of the population, or 20th of the population of the United States. So that's like more than 500,000 people in this country going to defend a forest, and it was like that. People couldn't believe that it was happening. In Australia, more than 1,500 people got arrested at that action, and once again, as in New South Wales and a few years later in Queensland, we were able to protect the forest. That the passion with which we defended it communicated itself to our community, and people decided that we could afford to protect these forests. But as we were doing this, it became clear that it wasn't going to be possible to save the planet one forest at a time or one issue at a time. That how is it that human beings, supposedly intelligent, were behaving in such a foolish manner as to be destroying our very own life support systems? Because that's what the rainforests are, and the other vital organs of this living planet that are under attack by development. And Paul Ehrlich said that we're sawing off the branch that we're sitting on, and that would seem to indicate some kind of a psychological problem. And I was trying to understand the nature of that psychological problem. I also really like the way that James Lovelock put it when he was the guy who popularised the Gaia theory that the Earth is a living organism. It's not just a rock floating through space with life mysteriously growing on the surface, but the Earth itself is alive, and we and all of the other forms of life on the Earth are like cells of that living being. And he said, and he's also the person, he's a scientist, he's the person who first discovered the hole in the ozone layer. And he said that the way that we are behaving towards the Earth is as if the brain were to decide it was the most important organ in the body and started mining the liver. So this indicates the nature of the problem, which is that a brain like this is so disconnected from the reality that of the matrix within which it exists, that it's forgotten, it's lost touch with the fact that it shares the same body and the same circulation, the same life with this liver. And in its madness, it thinks that it can mine the liver for some supposed riches that it might get, not knowing that it just is sentencing itself to death by doing so. So I was trying to understand how it was that we, why is it that we behave in such a foolish way? It seems so strange and bizarre that after, 4,000 million years of success on the Earth, that we should be behaving in such a demented fashion. And it was when the California poet Gary Schneider came to Australia in 1982 doing some poetry readings that I first heard the term deep ecology. And the analysis that deep ecology gave satisfied me that that was the closest that you know, I hadn't heard anybody pointing to the root cause of our behaviour. And to deep ecology, the reason is anthropocentrism, or human-centeredness. This idea that human beings are the crown of creation, the measurable being, that the earth consists of human beings on the one hand and resources on the other hand. And anything that isn't a human being or a resource has no value whatsoever. And anything other than human beings only has value, instrumental value. It only has value because it's valuable to us. And the earth itself has no value until we dig it up and turn it into something else. You know, the trees have no value except if we cut them down and turn them into lumber. And because all of the institutions of our society are based upon this very erroneous notion, it's very difficult to practice conservation under those circumstances because, you know, if you look at the science of economics, you find that at the very basis of economics is this idea that value is created by human beings, that nothing had any value before human beings appeared on the scene, and nothing has any value except its value to us. And the historical roots for that can be traced back to the Greek and the Roman traditions in some ways, and especially to the Judeo-Christian tradition, or at least the translations of it that are popular. I mean, there's also many themes within Judaism and Christianity which are other than this, but the mainstream of those traditions, which goes back to Genesis and the idea that we're here to subdue and dominate the earth, that the animals are to be in fear and trembling of us, that only man was created in God's image, only man has a soul, the other creatures don't have a soul, the rivers don't have a soul, the earth itself doesn't have a soul. And when you spell your name, it's with an uppercase, but when you spell earth, it's with a lowercase. And so everywhere in the society, everywhere in all of our institutions is encoded this strong belief in our own superiority and our own overwhelming importance compared to anything else. I found that one of the best ways to communicate is through song, and so I'm going to intersperse my presentation with some songs. And I'd like to start with a song written by an activist from the West Coast in California, Daryl Cherney, who's been protecting redwoods in California for over 15 years, and whose main claim to fame so far has been the fact that someone placed a bomb in his car about 10 years ago when he was campaigning vigorously during Redwood Summer, and he and his partner Judy Barry were seriously injured, and then to add insult to injury, the FBI tried to frame him for carrying the car bomb. So he pursued them vigorously ever since, and last year he won his case and was awarded over $1 million against the FBI for this dastardly act, and then donated this money back into the defence of the forest. So anyway, he's a great musician. He wrote this song about the historical roots of the environmental crisis. Now the Lord made the world in just 6 days. They wondered to behold when it was done. Deep oceans and blue sky, forest green and mountain high, with animals that crawl and fly and run. But one of God's creatures wasn't pleased. Guess who? It wanted to create with its own hands. So it clear-cut all the trees, carved the mountains, spoiled the seas, proclaiming it the way that God had planned. But you can't clear-cut your way to heaven, and strip mines don't make it with the Lord. Bulldozing the creation won't win God's admiration, and the pearly gates may close forevermore. Now my mama, she used to read the family Bible. gems at will. And I killed off many critters to extinction. But I'm sure God must have made them by mistake. 'Cause I had to keep my job where I plunder, rape and rob. And I swear to you, it's for my children's sake. But you can't clear cut your way to heaven. No, you can't, brothers and sisters. Strip minds don't make it with the Lord. Bulldozing the creation won't win God's admiration, and the pearly gates may close forevermore. Well, today I heard they mined the rock of ages, 'cause they thought it had a lump of gold inside. And they're dumping PCBs into the Sea of Galilee. And they built the cross on which our Savior died. And they leveled old Jerusalem for condos. Done built a shopping mall where Jesus did his thing. And as I looked on our success at creating such a mess, well, I swear I heard a band of angels singing. And no, you can't clear cut your way to heaven. And strip minds don't make it with the Lord. Bulldozing the creation won't win God's admiration, and the pearly gates may close forevermore. Earth first. So I was immediately captivated by the philosophy of deep ecology, but part of that philosophy was that philosophy isn't sufficient. And Arne Næss, the professor of philosophy who coined the term deep ecology, is the emeritus professor of philosophy from Oslo University in Norway, he said ecological ideas are not enough. We have to have an ecological identity, an ecological self. And he included ecological ideas. Deep ecological ideas also aren't enough. But he didn't give too many clues as to how we're to go about developing that ecological identity. But he said that, after thousands of years of conditioning where, we've sort of absorbed this anthropocentrism by osmosis from the moment that we're born, and the whole society, the incredible momentum is all going in that direction, it's impossible to think our way out of this mess. It's not enough just to have a new idea. And he said, well, when asked how we to get this ecological identity, he just said something vaguely like that he thought we needed community therapies. And at about the same time, in 1986, I met a remarkable woman called Joanna Macy. She was in Australia from the United States, and she was teaching a series of workshops called Despair and Empowerment. And at the time that I met her, we had just lost a really important forest that we'd been struggling for many months. We'd been camped out on the frontal dunes near this beach in New South Wales trying to protect the ancient trees that were growing along the dunes, and as often happens in these cases, we had failed to do so. So when we saw the posters advertising despair and empowerment, we thought, well, we definitely had the despair down, and that if this person could turn that into empowerment, then she would really be onto something. So I went along to this workshop, and sure enough, she was onto something, and she had this tremendous series of processes which went far, far deeper than ideas and were, touched people at the level of values and touched people at the level where behaviour changes, not through a sense of ought or must or duty or responsibility, but through a change in the person themselves. And because another of the favourite quotes that I have from Arne Næss was that he said, "A sense of responsibility is a treacherous basis for conservation." And by this he meant that a sense of responsibility implies that what we're feeling a sense of responsibility for is other than our very self. That if we feel a sense of responsibility for nature, then we don't understand that this is our own body, that the earth and the air and the water and the soil are part of our very self. And altruism, alter, is the other. So if we treat nature as though it's the other, and then from a sense of responsibility we defend nature, then we've given the game away right from the word go. And in discussing, deep ecology with Joanna, very quickly, within a few days of meeting, we developed the Council of All Beings as a vehicle to take the incredible engine of personal and social change that she represented and bring that together, a synthesis of that with the philosophy of deep ecology, and thus was launched this new form of workshops, which I call re-earthing workshops, and that I've been devoting myself to ever since, and Joanna and many other people have been continuing to do this work. And I thought to myself that this must be the kind of community therapy that Arne Næss is talking about, because we do this work in circles. It's not done on a one-to-one basis. We do this work in circles of community. And typically, people report a feeling of a healing that takes place, of that sense of alienation that all of us, to some extent or other, I think, feel from the living earth. And I'll just, as an aside, I'll say the fact that this is an illusion, this sense of separation, in case anyone's in any doubt about the fact that this is entirely illusory, it can be demonstrated with a very fast experiential process that only takes about 5 minutes, and that you can try now if you like. And that is that all we have to do if we doubt the fact that the sense of separation from nature is an illusion is to hold our breath for 5 minutes while we think about it. And so, like if you wish, I'm not joking, because it's really like either now or sometime you should try this, because it teaches you something about the nature of experiential processes. You might think that by understanding this as an idea, you've got it, but there's nothing like holding your breath for as long as you can while you try this, and you'll have a very different experience than just the one that you just had by thinking about it. But anyway, hold your breath for a few minutes and think about the atmosphere. The atmosphere. Nothing could sound further away from me, really. Like by calling it the atmosphere, it sounds like an object, it sounds like something over there. But of course it's not over there, it's cycling through me all the time. The fact that I'm unconscious of that, or I don't appreciate it, or I feel no gratitude to the green plants and the photosynthesis that makes my life possible, and I ignore all of those connections, doesn't change a thing. It doesn't change the reality of the fact that I'm utterly and inextricably embedded in the biology of this planet, and I have no independent existence, and there is no outside. There's no outside to throw our garbage. Everything is inside, everything is cycling through us, everything is interweaving with each other and interbeing with each other. And the only part that's missing is our psychological or spiritual appreciation of that fact. But it goes on regardless. So I thought, well, maybe the Council of All Beings is this community therapy, and that this is the sort of healing of ourselves, and in particular, the empowerment that takes place from doing these workshops is the empowerment that we need in order to work effectively as champions of, healing the earth and healing the disconnection between human beings and earth. But it wasn't long after that, like the following year, I think, that I found myself on this high mesa in the desert in the southwest of this country at an incredible ceremony where there must have been 300 or 400 Hopi Indians that were doing this ceremony, and it was just like the Council of All Beings. They were wearing masks of the animals and plants in their environment, and they were dancing in a circle, and the masks were more splendid, and the drums seemed to be far more confident than our drum ever is, but nonetheless, that was what they were doing. And the people there told me that they said that this village where they lived had been continuously inhabited for longer than anywhere else in the Americas. And I don't know if that's true or not, but they'd been there a hell of a long time. And they were still doing this ceremony. And I suddenly thought, therapies aren't supposed to take that long. You know, even psychoanalysis doesn't take that long. And that, so that the therapy is something that you go into when you need healing. And an ecological therapy would be one that you go into when you need ecological healing. And then if the therapy works, then, if you had to keep going back and back and back to the therapy for the rest of your life, and your children and your grandchildren had to do the same, then you'd probably think there was something wrong with the therapy, that it wasn't working. But so then I realised that, what was missing wasn't a therapy, but it was a social healing that was required. That's something that was missing from our society that society of people had. And when I studied it, I realised that it's impossible to find a single example of an indigenous society that still holds to its old ways that doesn't have such ceremonies and rituals at the very heart of the society. Ceremonies and rituals where the human family acknowledges our interconnectedness with the rest of the Earth family, and in acknowledging that in a respectful way through ritual, through ceremony, it maintains that, and it keeps connection with the Earth is something. It's like a verb. It's something that we have to do, and we have to do it over and over again, because there must be this tendency. It's not just, until then I thought that perhaps it was a modern phenomenon, that it was because we'd lived in cities and, we'd become disconnected by all the concrete and, the physical separation from nature. But even hunter-gatherers whose lives are totally embedded in nature the whole time still have ceremonies and rituals like this, whereas bears and mountain lions don't, and that there's something, so it's something about being a human being rather than just being a modern human being. And then I started to wonder, well, when did our indigenous ancestors lose these ceremonies? Was it when the great religions came along? Was it 3,000 years ago? But then, when you consider that less than just a few hundred years ago, Starbuck says 9 million women were burnt at the stake by the Inquisition. For what? Well, probably for worshipping the sun and the moon and the seasons of the year instead of the sky god. They were worshipping the earth. And so even after thousands of years of Judaism and Christianity, these ancient pagan ceremonies and rituals and things were still being practiced. And there must have been this tremendous desire to suppress them, just as astronomers were being burnt at the stake for daring to suggest that the Earth wasn't the centre of the universe. So this incredible project to prove the central importance of humanity is, very passionately held, and not only hundreds of years ago, but to this very day. So that the basis of economics is that human beings create value, and when the dollar bill says, "In God we trust," the God that they're talking about is an old man with a white beard who created the Earth 6,000 years ago as some kind of a moral testing ground for one species, human beings. And so it's a tremendous energy that's needed to swim upstream against this current. And that's why, I think that even, especially for us, we need to have these ceremonies, we need to have these processes whereby we continually find our way back to connection with the living earth and remembering in a very practical and physical way that we're part of all of this. One of the things that's grown out of the same kind of questions, I guess, that deep ecology asks, there have been various strains. There's been ecofeminism, there's been social ecology, but the one that I'd like to look at in particular tonight is ecopsychology, which is, I guess the two most important books that have brought this forward have been Theodore Roszak's Voice of the Earth and James Hillman's book, great book called We've Had 100 Years of Therapy and the World's Getting Worse. So it's sort of looking at looking at the way that psychology and ecology require each other, and trying to bring these two disciplines together. And looking at the psychology of this sense, it's as if there was a leaf that was growing on a tree that somehow thought that it could profit from cutting that tree down for timber. It's the same kind of an idea as James Lovelock proposed. And what is the psychology of that, and what kind of psychological practices can bring light to that and can bring healing to that? I think that the Council of All Beings and the other re-earthing processes, although fundamentally they are kind of an attempt at reclaiming a part of our society that was suppressed, a social function rather than being an individual therapy. There are many individual therapies. There are eco-psychologists who are practicing eco-therapies. There are psychologists who are taking their patients outside and doing their sessions under a tree. Like how radical can you get? But especially in not so much in the United States, but in Europe, there's a really burgeoning eco-psychology movement of people who are saying, well, if the eco-psychology group in England performed this beautiful piece of theatre in which it was a number of scenes of a therapist on the Titanic and different exchanges of the therapist and the patient, where the patient was reporting all of these dreams, and the therapist was asking the patient, to go back to their childhood. The patient was dreaming about icebergs and about disasters and all kinds of things, and there were these interpretations that were being made, and finally the patient was pointing out the window and saying, look, look, and the therapist was saying, well, could you just please, get back to your dream, and so on. And so there's this incredible denial that's going on, and this refusal to take seriously the pain that all of us feel about what's happening to our world, and the pain that any primate would feel if it was threatened in the way that we're threatened, and we're not allowed to really discuss this. It's like we're allowed to, or if we're allowed to discuss it, we're only allowed to discuss it in very unemotional kind of a language. And so part of the importance of Joanna Macy's work is in freeing us to really express our deepest anguish about what's happening to our world. That's the nature of the despair work, and that's part of what we do also in the deep ecology workshops, is that we create a safe container and a context for the expression of the deepest feelings of sorrow and rage and terror and despair about what's happening to our world. And that the whole, Joanna says that if everybody was to allow themselves to express their deepest feelings about what's going on, we would sweep every government and every corporation and everything that stands in the way of our survival on this planet, we would sweep them out of our way in 24 hours. So the function of the suppression of these feelings is that they turn us, they make us numb, they absorb our best life force energy in holding these things at bay, and they make us unintelligent. It's a really important part of our intelligence is these feelings, and the rational part of us is usurping the word intelligence. It's saying only I am intelligence. It says thinking, and yet when we look back at our past, when we look back especially at our non-human past, pre-human past, and think about the fact that for hundreds of millions of years, thousands of millions of years, every single one of our ancestors showed the incredible intelligence of being able to survive all manner of challenges to be able to reach the age of being able to reproduce itself before being consumed. This incredible lineage of intelligence, and all done without any thinking whatsoever. It's like very accurate feelings were selected for every step of the way. Any creature that didn't have accurate feelings, any creature that smiled and wagged its tail at the wrong time and went forward when it should have been running for its life, didn't have babies, and the ones that did have babies were the ones that made good decisions based upon these, older parts of the brain that we now ignore at our peril. And especially at our peril, because it's these feelings that move us. When we say, I was moved, it's feelings that we're talking about, not thoughts. So we can think, or, we can think about what's happening to the world, and it doesn't change anything for us. But if we feel something strongly enough, then that's our motivation, then we do something about it. And what we need, I guess, is for people to, be doing a lot more. I guess I'd like to go on then to describe a little bit more about some of the processes that we use, which are ecologically healing in the sense that they heal our disconnectedness. You know, that ecology is about connection, and they heal our disconnectedness. And they're ecologically healing in that they heal our ability to defend the more general ecology, the ecology of the world. And one of the themes of this is taking off from the work of Thomas Berry and Brian Swim, and their work in presenting the universe story in a new spiritual way. That Thomas Berry is a theologian who has become a geologian. He's a man in his 90s now, and he went from theo, God, to geo, earth, but God within the earth. I mean, he's still a devout religious Christian, I would say, but he recognises the earth as an expression of that divinity, and recognises the universe as that. And he says that it's not that we live in the universe, we are part of the universe. We are that part of the universe which, has been, the record of our travel, of our evolution in the universe is encoded in our bodies, in the DNA, in the very saltiness of our blood flows the seas of ancient times, and that we're that part of the universe which has finally evolved to the point of complexity that we can, with our instruments, turn around and look back at the 13.7 billion year history of the trail that we've travelled and gasp in awe and wonder at the story that reveals itself to us, which is far more extraordinary, really, than any creation myth. In Australia, in the Northern Territory, there's one group of people who believe that the universe was formed when a great frog vomited forth the oceans, Well, the story that science reveals and the empirical method reveals is far more extraordinary than any of those stories as far as I can see. So I'd like to just, honour Thomas Berry and what he's brought forth before I talk about the particular processes that we use to bring that to life, not as an idea, but as a living reality for us as participants in these circles that we do. I'd like to share with you a poem that was written by Drew Dellinger, who's a young musician from California. He travels a lot with Matthew Fox, another theologian who does this techno-cosmic mass, where he does, attracts a lot of young people to his mass, and Drew does this song there, and it's called the Universe Jam. It starts with a passage from Teilhard de Chardin and then goes forward in Drew Dellinger himself. The flame has lit up the world from within. All things, individually and collectively, are interpenetrated and flooded by it. You who mould the manifold so as to breathe your life into it, I pray to you. The first verse of the universe, pours forth like a sea of mystery. Out of the void, a manifest silence. Space-time comes into existence, unseen shaping, swirling, unfurling. Hydrogen, helium, divine is revealed within galactic whirlpools. As energy flows in, a star collapses, supernova, explosion, a cloud of cosmic debris. Drawn together by gravity, by the mystery of attraction, primordial bonding, universe action, stardust swirling, swarming gases, organizing and forming masses. See, the sun is the one that spun the 9 others, gave birth to Mother Earth and her sisters and brothers, Mercury, Venus, Mars and Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune and Pluto. Everyone is the sun. The sun is the one. Everyone. Everybody better wake up. But the earth gave birth to continents and oceans, shaping and shaking in waves of emotion, crashes of lightning, bombarding and striking, exposing the globe as it glows like a strobe, and setting the stage for the first cell of life. So simple, so basic, so primal that I place it at the top of the chain from which all life sprang. More forms adorn the earth as they bring, diversity dispersing the song of creation. Ring in the dawn, sing along in celebration. I just want to celebrate life. I just want to celebrate Earth. I just want to celebrate the cosmos. I just want to celebrate. The sea comes alive, starts to thrive with new life forms. Storms swept the planet, plants crept on ground and enchanted by the sun's solar power. The earth gave birth to green leaves and flowers. Lava flows, mountains rose, tropical islands, forests and meadows, fed by the fresh water streams, the veins, heavenly winds rain back to the sea. The fish are set free as they swim onto sand. Fins turn to limbs and they limb onto land. Amphibians, reptiles, new styles of creatures, seeing through new being, the range of her features, the earth. Your mother gave birth to eyesight. Looking within as she spins in the sunlight, on to the dawn, to the day of the dinosaur. Pterodactyl saws, Tyrannosaurus rex, towering, devouring, so who's up next? Mammals and primates, all life interrelated, divinely created. So don't you think it's time we celebrated? I just want to celebrate life. I just want to celebrate Earth. I just want to celebrate the cosmos. I just want to celebrate. So there are numerous processes that we can use, and many of the best book, if you're interested in doing this kind of stuff yourself, is Joanna Macy's Coming Back to Life, and that's just like a recipe book with hundreds and hundreds of experiential processes for doing this work. And the one that I like the best, and that we'll probably do this weekend, is a process designed by Sister Miriam Theresa McGillis, who's a Catholic nun that lives in a community called Genesis Farm in New Jersey. And she's formed a new order of Catholic nuns called the Sisters of Earth. So the Sisters of Earth cut across all of the other orders. There's like, Franciscan and, all of the other... Anyway, the nuns, they come together as the Sisters of Earth. And this is a very Catholic ritual, which really, it's, got candles and bells and incense and things like that. But the way that it works is that you make a spiral of a certain length. So let's say the spiral is 100 metres long, 100 yards long, say, and that this spiral could be made out of a piece of string, or if you do this outside, you could mow a field with the spiral. And then you divide the length that you've chosen, which is arbitrary, but whatever length you choose for your spiral, you divide that into 15 billion. So this was actually made before the discoveries this year that actually narrowed the age of the universe down to 13.7 billion. It's amazing the kind of focus that we're able to get on those incredible events. So that means that every yard is about 150 million years. And then you place a candle in the centre of the spiral to represent the flaring forth of the universe in the first place. And then you place candles at different points around the spiral to represent different events in the story of the universe. And then together we walk around this spiral carrying a flame. We light the flame from the Big Bang, or whatever you want to call that, whatever that mysterious thing was that happened. We light a flame and carry it around with incense and bells and chanting and celebrating, and then we light the first candle, which may be the birth of galaxies. And we learn from this that we're in a developing universe because there was a time of galactic formation, and that time no longer exists. There are no more new galaxies being born today. We live in a developing universe, a universe that had a youth and an adolescence, and we don't know exactly where we are in any kind of ultimate sense, but the universe is developing and becoming more complex, and perhaps we light a candle to celebrate the moment that the heat of the universe cooled sufficiently for the subatomic particles that were just appearing and annihilating each other up to that point, and suddenly hydrogen appeared because it was cool enough for an atom, for a nucleus and an electron to form a relationship for the first time, and all of these things. And then, eventually we come to the great supernova explosion of the grandmother star that lived around here somewhere. And in the explosion of that star in a supernova, all of the elements of the sun and of the planets and of our own lives were formed, and we light a candle to celebrate that, and we move forward. And, we learn many things, but, the amazing thing is, it's like we're a metre from the end, and the dinosaurs still haven't disappeared. There's no sign of us yet. and by the time you get to us, there's no room for a candle any longer, you know, and so you get this incredible feeling in your body, a visceral kind of a sensation of the relative, you know, where we fit into this picture, and it's a great tool for countering the anthropocentrism. It's a great tool for a kind of a humility, and I'd like to share another poem with you, if that's okay, because it sort of fits in well at this point, which is a poem by, in my opinion, the greatest American poet, Robinson Jeffers, who was better known, I think, 10 or 20 years ago than he is today. He died in the 60s, he did his best writing in the 20s, and as well as doing the most exquisite nature poetry, he was one of the people who grasped the extraordinary implications of the scientific information that was being revealed. You know, Matthew Fox, the theologian I mentioned, he says that we're living in a time of primary revelation, that the old books will only take you so far at a time like this because God is revealing himself, or the universe is revealing itself on a day-to-day basis, you know, and we're learning more and more about the nature of the extraordinary nature of this place that we live in and how we come to be here. So Robinson Jeffers was living at a time when the whole knowledge of tectonic plates was first being grasped by people, that the earth wasn't a stable kind of a place, but that mountains were being formed and oceans were being formed. And also the age of the universe was becoming apparent, because in 1920 it was only 60 years after the general intelligent opinion would have been that the earth was 6,000 years old. You know, most people in the mid-19th century believed that, you know, they counted up all of the begats in the Old Testament to determine, you know, how long it was since God created Adam, and that's how they determined the age of the universe. And you know, by 1920, you know, the universe was just revealing itself and growing older and older. And also, he was the first real enemy in this country of the anthropocentrism, and he felt that one of his poems, he said, he was talking about organic wholeness, and he said, organic wholeness, love that, not man apart from that. You know, so that it's only as part of the organic wholeness he thinks that we should love man, not that man separate from that is an ugly thing, like an arm that's been severed from a body or something like that. So this is his poem called The Treasure. Mountains, mountains, a moment's earth waves rising and hollowing. The earth too is ephemeral. The stars, short-lived as grass, the stars spin in the nebulae and dry in their summer. They spiral, blind up space, scattered black seeds of the future. Nothing lives long. The whole sky's recurrences tick the seconds of the hours, of the ages, of the gulf before birth, and the gulf after death is like dated. To labour 80 years in a notch of eternity is nothing too tiresome. Enormous repose after, enormous repose before, the flash of activity. Surely you never have dreamed the incredible depths were prologue and epilogue merely to the surface play in the sun, the instant of life, what is called life. I fancy that silence is the thing. This noise, I found word for it, interjection, a jump of the breath at that silence. Stars burn, grass grows, men breathe. As a man finding treasure says, but the treasure's the essence. Before the man spoke, it was there, and after he has spoken, he gathers it, inexhaustible treasure. So, to bring this back to the theme of ecological healing, my belief and my experience is that to the extent that we can sink our roots into the living planet through ritual, through ceremony, through our thinking, accurate thoughts about who we are, you know, and where we live, through knowing that, through remembering who we are, as part of this, through remembering the fact that we're interwoven in this fabric of life, through remembering that the world is not a pyramid with us on the top, but the world is a web, and we're not the spider in the middle, we're just one strand in that web. And through whatever processes that we can do, whatever poems and songs, and anything that reminds us of this, we become earthlings in that way. We surmount the social conditioning and the social fictions about our identity that we've learned in this culture, and we stand in a place, on the earth itself, in a position to have accurate vision and accurate decisions about priorities and all kinds of things about what to do now in this incredible challenge, really, that we face at this time, that we live we live within the sixth extinction spasm that we know about in 4,000 million years. It's an incredible occasion. We celebrated a millennium. Well, it's been 65,000 millennia since the last one of these. It's been 65,000 millennia since the last time that anything happened like what's happening on the earth today. And somehow, I can't see any other context that can make any sense of our lives unless we somehow acknowledge that. There was a meeting of biologists last year. I think 600 biologists met, and over 2/3 of them believe that half of all of the species of life on Earth will be extinguished by the middle of this century that we're in at the moment. So the last time that happened was 65 million years ago. And, how does one live at a time like this? So, firstly, I think, as someone who feels patriotic for the Cenozoic era, I feel attached to the Cenozoic era and all of the magnificent things that have evolved. At the time of the extinction of the dinosaurs, nothing larger than a cat got through the sieve. All the big things disappeared. A lot of the little things disappeared as well. But our ancestors, who must have been smaller than a cat, because nothing any larger than that made it through, our ancestors found their opportunity and came forth into the light at that time. And as is the case with these extinction events, there was a period of immense creativity because there was all of this incredible space to evolve into. There were all of these ecological niches that were empty, that had been vacated. And so things radiated forth from the survivors. And I'm in no hurry to bring that to a close, personally. As Robinson Jeffers said, to labor 80 years in the notch of eternity is nothing too tiresome. And I personally haven't got anything better to do than to just try and figure out a way to see if there's still a way that we can minimise the extent of this extinction event that we human beings have ushered forth. Now, I'm not blaming us for doing this because I personally feel that, it's like any monkey would have done the same thing, that it's like the very things that made us so successful as to be able to clamber out of the primate kind of situation into our new human situation. Those are the very things now that we have to somehow supersede, that we have to overcome. So it's like, I don't think guilt is called for at all at this time. It's not like we should be beating ourselves over the head for what we've done. But I do feel that it's possible that we could come up with something very, very creative at this time, and that's kind of what I'm searching for. So I don't feel that by any means that I found it, but the Council of All Beings and all the rainforest work that I do are really just prayers for this new dispensation of consciousness that's going to allow us to overcome our conditioning and to find a way to move forward now, rather than allowing ourselves to be defeated and allowing the Cenozoic era to collapse. And should it be ants or cockroaches, should it be their turn, I congratulate them and I love them and I have no resentment, because I know that this is going to happen one day. could be tomorrow, or it could be in 100 million years' time, and I vote for the latter myself, you know, like, remember that you're standing on a planet that's evolving, revolving at 900 miles an hour. It's orbiting at 90 miles per second, so it's reckoning a sun that is the source of all our power. The sun and you and me and all the stars that we can see are moving at 1,000,000 miles a day in an outer spiral of at 40,000 miles an hour in a galaxy they call the Milky Way. The Milky Way. Our galaxy contains 100 billion stars. It's 100,000 light years side to side. It bulges in the middle, 16,000 light years thick, but out by us it's just 3,000 light years wide. We're 30,000 light years from galactic central points. We go round every 200 million years. And this galaxy's only one of millions and billions in this amazing and expanding universe. Expanding universe. The universe itself keeps on expanding and expanding in all of the directions it can whiz. As fast as it can go, at the speed of light, you know, 12 million miles a minute, and that's the fastest speed there is. So remember when you're feeling very small and insecure, how amazingly unlikely is your birth. And sink your roots deep into the galaxy dance of life, planet Earth. And sink your roots deep into reality, dance your life for planet Earth. Just to finish off, I'd like to say that anyone who'd like to get urgent action alerts about rainforest issues, leave your email address. Anyone who would like to hear about other Council of Wellbeing's workshops after this weekend, leave your email address. All the fees for my lectures and speaking at the Council of Wellbeing's go to Ecuador for the protection of the rainforests. I make my living selling CDs and books and videotapes, which will be available down the front afterwards if anyone wants to support this work. That's one way you can do so. And all donations to the Rainforest Information Centre in the United States are tax deductible. Ask me how. Thank you very much.
But John has agreed to answer questions for a while for any of you who might have them. So I'm going to bring the house lights up so I can see you and John can see you a little better. And just go ahead and raise your hand.
Well, questions and statements.
Sure. Something you said toward the end of that about it becoming the time of the cockroaches and ants. I read an article called Planet of Weeds that was very well done that said that humans are very effective weeds, and in the simplification of the Earth's ecosystem that is happening now, humans as a species will likely be among the last survivors if it goes that far, although our population will likely be much smaller.
Well, the last big survivors. I mean, there's bacteria living in the engines of jet airplanes. You know, there's some pretty tenacious critters out there, and I don't think we'll be anywhere near the last. But the point, good point, I think.
I think what else you need is a
Thank you very much. I might mention in that context that Michael Moore's new book was released yesterday. It's called Dude, I Want My Country Back. And he claims that it breaks the Patriot Act on every page.
Others?
I'm quite interested in the psychology that you were talking about, and it seems to me like what you were explaining quite eloquently is a form of insanity. It's I can only give an example. It's like beating your thumb with a hammer in the hopes that you'll end up with a different result. Is that the dilemma that we're in?
I like that. I think I'll remember that. Thank you.
Well, in a sense, that's what I sense from you. That's what you're explaining, and that it's not just a human dilemma, but it's a whole living dilemma on this planet as well. Except that the other living creatures on this planet don't have that sense of self-destruction or being. Why is that? Is that a reason?
Anyone got an idea for that?
I don't know. I'm kind of going out on a limb here, and a few friends of mine and I are going to talk about this.
Try to speak even louder.
Okay, sorry. We're going to talk about this paper that I read recently, and it talks about the symbiosis continuum, and it talks about pathogenicity, parasitism, commensalism, and mutualism. And it talks about how life takes these various forms of interacting with life. And I'm fascinated with that concept of moving towards mutualism. It's not altruism, it's not egoism, it's this place in between. And this article talks about this, and it talks about the examples of this, and that the cells that animals and plants are made out of, they think are the result of possible early parasitism that became the mutualism, and then the cells had organelles inside that were originally life forms of their own, and then evolved to the point where they could only survive inside of this cellular system as organelles. And this is much like you said, with us being kind of organelles within the earth, or like James Lovelock said. So I think in some sense maybe that's what we should be approaching, is this mutualism. And they talk about it in business too. It's teamwork, it's synergy, it's all of these things. It permeates around us, and we're rarely coherent of it.
In this new understanding we're trying to achieve, I find it difficult to place where technology should be in all this. With this understanding that we have in this 21st century, where does that belong? Where does that go? All of these things we've learned, all these things we can accomplish, but somehow should revert from in a way to maintain that which we have underneath our feet. How do we deal with that? Because we don't lose the knowledge that we've gained, but we somehow have to keep it. I don't know. It's difficult. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, only that I think a lot of the things that we've discovered would be very useful to us if they were in the hands of a different kind of a human being than the one that we've revealed ourselves to be thus far, or not even the human being, but in the hands of different, if society was organised differently, if we had a different government, if we had different institutions, if we were looking after each other, and if we were looking after the earth, then many of the technologies which are so destructive at the moment might have a very different aspect, so that I'm not, and some of them I'm sure we would dispense with entirely. I'm not saying that everything that we've discovered is necessarily going to be, going to be useful in the ecozoic future that Thomas Berry, is calling us to. But I do feel that that many of the repair that needs to be done at this point requires, technologies that we have. but they're not being used for repair at the moment necessarily. They're being used for profit or for other things.
So I guess you would fall on the side that the beast is kind of within us, and it's not the technology itself that's created the beast.
Well, I mean, some of the technology has nothing but beastly uses, like I'm sure that, the hydrogen bomb we can dispense with, and, most of the weapons have no other use to us, but there are many two-edged swords in there which are being used badly now, but which could be used in a very different way. And so I haven't looked at it, like I wouldn't like to be the one that's deciding which basket to put things into, but I think it would be an important discussion that we will need to have once we enter the ecozoic as to which pieces we're going to take with us and which we're going to leave behind.
Yes. Natural events cause changes, major changes, extinction. I've been involved in global warming, and one of the big arguments is global warming has occurred many other times. So why should we worry about it? It's going to happen whether humans cause it, something else is going to cause it. Now, taking that step a little further, human beings are likely to cause extinction. We are doing it. So what is the goal? What is the real goal for us to slow this down? I think, while I don't personally believe the earth is here for humans, the whole direction of human beings is to use the earth to serve. Everything we're doing is centered around that. If we don't do that, if we go back to living like primitive people, which I sort of subscribe to at some level, we would probably delay this extinction, but ultimately something else is going to cause it. And ultimately humans are really going to be here a very short time in the scheme of things.
Well, I mean, I could only say that to me that sounds a little bit like, that if I was at some, if I was possibly quite a young person and I was suffering from some kind of a disease which it was unclear whether that disease was going to be fatal or not, if I was to say, well, I'm going to die one day anyway, and it might as well be now, what's the point of prolonging this or something? I agree with you that I totally have no hope whatsoever that we will avoid extinction, eventually. Nothing lives forever, stars die, galaxies die, everything dies. But, when I think about the dinosaurs, which had like 150 million years before their sort of, what do you call it in baseball when the team is out, I sort of feel that we've got some really important adventures ahead of us, which I would be very reluctant to forego. Now, should it be that, my vote for, like another 10 million years, or give me another 20 million years, or whatever it is, should it be that I'm outvoted and that everyone says, no, we just want another 2 or 3 generations of, SUVs, then so be it, I'm not worried about what's going to happen to the Earth, because the Earth's, it's just going to be, last time it was an asteroid and this time it was humans, what's the difference? It's natural phenomena, I'm not this, Robinson Jefferson in another poem says, meteors are not needed less than mountains. Just because something is over very quickly, doesn't mean that it's any less natural or any less valuable, and if we as humans burn ourselves out and live out our, he says, you making haste on decay, not blameworthy, so there's no blame involved in it, but you should just know that that's what you're doing. But I sort of am, I would vote for, well, I like this, I like this, do you know what I mean? I like the whole thing too. I like ants and cockroaches, and I like bacteria. I like life, like biophilia, I just think it's great that it all came to life. And so whatever comes next, I'm sure will be just as splendid as anything that has ever been before, But I vote for more of the Cenozoic. I don't want the Cenozoic to end. And so in the end, I would just have to say that that's my personal opinion. I don't think that I can't see any argument that says it ought to be that way, but that's what I would
But I think ultimately, are we trying to make it a more meaningful existence for humans? I hate to focus on humans, but isn't that ultimately what we're really trying to do? Is because the way we're heading, it's really going to be a very unpleasant place. It already is becoming a very unpleasant place. So although we shouldn't be anthropocentric, essentially that's really what this is all about, is making it a more meaningful place for humans.
Thank you.
Let me just queue up a few people here to get some additional voices in. Here, and then there. Okay, and then down here, this gentleman. So those 4, please. Comments or questions? Oh, I'm sorry, we were here first.
Yeah, I guess I was going to add to that. I guess I'm still having trouble understanding what anthropocentrism really means. Because what you said makes total sense to me, but it also sounds anthropocentric, just like Dan was saying. Also, and it seems like the people that try to make a distinction between anthropocentrism and biocentrism or ecocentrism, it seems like it does have to boil down to, if we like these other species here, it's because we like them here. And it's still about us in that sense. I mean, sometimes people seem to use the term anthropocentrism in a pejorative kind of a sense. And that's I guess that's what I don't really understand about it. I don't know if you have any thoughts about the term or...
Well, I think that's a good point that you make. You know, that sounds like a valid criticism. But I do feel that there's a difference. Well, okay, so let's say it's like humanism that a humanism that is thought through has to include all of the other things. Like I'm not sure how to answer that. I think that there's a big difference between an anthropocentrism which says that only humans have any importance, nothing else has any value, and an anthropocentrism which, I think that that's valid what you're saying, but which says, as Aldo Leopold said, called for a kind of a biocentric, a democracy of all of, what did he say, that we should see ourselves as a plain member of the biota. And so why should we see ourselves that way? Well, really you can't say whether, you're doing it for anyone else. You can't say whether, anything else cares whether you do that or not. So in the end, perhaps it is just for ourselves. But still, I feel, maybe we just need different words for it, but I feel like that's an important distinction.
Before we go to our next one, I'm going to just try to add a footnote here. If you want, we could have a whole class on this, of course, right? You might look at Beneath the Surface, which is a book that wrestles with deep ecology and some of its claims, and can do so more than we can tonight, especially the article in there by Eric Katz. But I think that there's also a book another book I'll point some of you to. It's called Rare Earth. And in it argues that there may well be life scattered throughout the universe, but from what we know about the prerequisites of life, complex life, in other words, animal life, is probably exceedingly rare in the universe, and quite an interesting, and at least to a layperson, a compelling case is advanced in this book. And if that's the case, then you look at the complex life that we have on this earth, and it's not surprising that in the light of such fact claims, people tend to revert to metaphors of the sacred to describe their affective connection to this place. So people start to talk about it as a miracle. And when you start to find or think about a sacred ground for a value system, that can jolt one out of an anthropocentric perspective. It's not that you don't love the miracle of life because you're human and you enjoy it in the ways in which John is talking about, but I think for a lot of people, it's also a sense that there's something sacred about it too, even if that's very mysterious and I can't quite think it all through. Yeah.
Well, I just first want to say it's incredible to see another human being in the world that's made an offering of themselves to really work in this capacity on the earth. And one of the things I was thinking, as the earth is in crisis and we're doing the destruction that we're doing, it's also provoking the human being to really propel ourselves, to begin to change our consciousness from one in which we're almost creating a spiritual evolution, a transformation of spiritual consciousness on the earth at this time. Because it's very exciting when we think about how we can transcend, what would help us transcend our value system, which is based on money, which has to do with our individual wants. You know, greed, I want this, or I want that, or corporation wants this for themselves. All of a sudden we create a change in consciousness where we're creating communities, we're creating healing that has to do with the earth, where we actually transcend ourselves, where we are one with everything. We're one with the animals, we're one with the trees, the air, and the land. And maybe this is what, I sometimes think, is this what this is really about? Are we in crisis to call, it's a calling to create this spiritual evolution. And that as the human being wakes up to this evolution, we wake up to imagination, we wake up to creativity, and we're actually being called in this moment to do this. And sometimes I think maybe this what's happening is actually what's the answer for us, for our own spiritual, movement, and dedicating, offering our lives so we're actually responding is what's supposed to happen. So we change.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
There's kind of ties into what I was thinking that now with all the things we know from physics and science has given us powers of observation that kind of perhaps pale in comparison to what our ancestors had before the marble ash, which is still very amazing. And one of the things, if you talk to people who aren't into environmental issues and stuff, if you talk to them and you say, we have serious problems with the biosphere right now, they say, oh, no, technology is going to solve that. Science will fix that. But it seems to me that that's exactly what the ideas of sustainability that are coming out of ecology, that is what's going to fix. That is the technology that people are talking about. But how do you make that connection with people? Or how do you help people see that that kind of sitting there right in the face? It's the question that I grapple with.
Make a comment, and I appreciate your answer this afternoon and tonight to the question about the distinctions. The thing I'm wrestling with in my own mind is that we've sort of taken for granted that we're the first species that does all this bad stuff. And the more I think about it, I think that's the way we evolved, and all species do this. So bacteria left unchecked will kill its host and die itself. So the checks and balances that occur. So I think we're doing the same thing that everything we evolved from does, except we can do it bigger and better. It works in that bigger and better. And I could follow up Mary's comment and say that maybe that is the magic of this situation. We did evolve from very selfish all life forms, as I said, to just think about this for the first time now, that life forms are selfish. They go on with what they can do, whatever they are, until they totally destroy their small microenvironment, like a bacterial rot phase, and then the bacteria grow so much and so pollute their intestine that they die. They quit growing and die. And maybe one of the things happening is that we do this so well, we can so destroy everything that we have this challenge now because our being after what we can do is so great that we have to find a way of being different from whence we came.
Let me speak to that a little bit. That sounds remarkably like a libertarian theory of ecology. Where there's some sort of Adam Smithian magic hand regulating everything because everything is out for its own selfish interests. And I think it's a valid theory that could explain a lot of the things we observe in nature, but we could also have other theories of cooperation, which there is ample evidence of, and other theories could exist as well.
a new voice.
At the risk of sounding anthropocentric, we have the power to change. We have choice.
The anthropologist Roy Rappaport argues that when we look at religions and spiritualities and rituals and such cultural complexes, they're nothing more nor less than the ways in which human beings adapt to their ecosystems. And when we look at the very rapid way in which humans around the world are revisioning their religions in the light of what we're learning from science, inventing new ones, oftentimes again in the light of science, and inventing new ritual forms to express, convey, and deepen our understandings in these areas. One could argue that in part what's going on tonight with John here and in many other places around the world is the evolution of an ecological consciousness and an ecological conscience. And one of the things that I think one of the reasons that I'm drawn to grassroots groups as a scholar and as a way to think about ethics is because it's often from the margins, the social margins, that the new insights come. We certainly learned that in the civil rights era and many other times throughout human history. When we look at things like human rights theory, 1215, the Magna Carta, the first effort of the nobility to wrest power from the king, arbitrary power from the king. It took about 800 years to get a United Nations Declaration on Human Rights, and we haven't exactly achieved human rights on Earth, but at least the burden of proof has shifted in an important way. It wasn't until 1973 that we had an Endangered Species Act in America, and that act is now being replicated some other places on Earth. And that doesn't happen apart from a change in consciousness. So part of what we're seeing, I think, if you look at the so-called environmental movement and its broadening into and connecting with other social movements, is a very rapid change, especially when you think about how slow human cultures traditionally have evolved. So on the one hand, we evolve these tremendous technological and destructive capabilities in a very rapid way, and at the same time, what we might just for shorthand call the resistance to the shadow side of that is also evolving in a very rapid way. And I think that John and many people in this room and many other people around the world are engaged in exactly that adaptive process. And we don't need to understand ourselves as anything but natural beings to sort of see that that's what's going on, I think. Do you have anything, other comments before we let you folks get at you individually here?
We can plug into FDA protests.
I was asking about the Miami FDA protests. Are you going to be down there?
Unfortunately, I would love to be, because one of the projects that we're working on in Ecuador is we've been trying to protect this natural area for 15 years, and driven by the institutions of corporate globalization, like the IMF and so on. The oil companies have come into the Amazon headwaters, and they're laying everything to waste that we've been working for. And so I'd like to keep working down in Ecuador, but really where the work needs to be done is in Miami. But I'm actually going to be in Europe at the time and doing some support action in Berlin, which is where I'm going to be on that day.
Well, a local thing that might happen with the FTA if it passes. I don't know how many of you remember the work that was done with trying to save the Ecological River from the cement kiln. The cement kiln has now been built, and I don't know if it's operating yet, but a Brazilian company has bought 50% of the cement plant, and if the FTA passes and Florida decides to do something like, say, require a mercury scrubber so that we don't poison the fish that we might want to eat with mercury or whatever else we're going to do, the Brazilian company could sue Florida and say that law infringes on our right to profit, and the United States Trade Representative would have the responsibility of defending that lawsuit if it even wanted to. And the state of Florida could lose, and with the specter of lawsuits and losing lawsuits and having to pay lots of money to foreign corporations for trying to protect the health of its citizens, that would likely cause a chilling effect of such legislation, and states would be very unlikely to pass laws to protect the health of their citizens if they're going to be sued and maybe lose to a foreign corporation.
Well, certainly one thing I've learned in my short time in this community, there's no surfeit of causes or people taking them up. It's a very politically active community. John has some ways to network on forest campaigns. If you want to come up and get on those lists, he's also got, I can vouch for the music. It's quite entertaining, and he's got, I think you have your stuff for children too, those of you who have wee ones, some great folk singing that they like a great deal. So thank you very much for being with us, John. And don't forget also, if you're interested in the workshop, to find out about that tonight. And feel free to come up and say hi to John tonight before he takes off.